The Harrison Industries badge tumbled from manicured fingers. Gold metal struck Italian marble. The sound cut through midnight silence like breaking glass. Olivia Watson pressed trembling palms against her lips, her breath fogging the polished surface of her mahogany desk. The woman who owned this 40-story empire now crouched in its shadows, her emerald silk blouse torn at the shoulder. Lucas Bennett's cleaning cart rolled to a whispered stop. He'd mopped these floors for 2 years, but never seen the untouchable CEO reduced to this raw terror. Her mascara drew dark rivers down porcelain cheeks. Her designer heels lay abandoned beside her. One strap snapped. She lifted desperate eyes to meet his across the moonlit office. "Please," her voice barely survived the space between them. "Don't talk." They're listening. Lucas had arrived at Harrison Industries at exactly 11:30 p.m., the same time he'd clocked in for 24 months straight. His security badge hung from a retractable cord, its worn edges bearing witness to countless late-night entries. The lobby's marble floors reflected fluorescent lighting that never seemed warm, no matter how many times he'd walked across them. Tonight, something felt different in the building's atmosphere. The usual corporate emptiness carried an undercurrent of tension. His supervisor, Frank Rodriguez, had already left for the evening with his typical gruff instructions. 41st floor needs extra attention tonight. Some executive meeting ran late. Papers everywhere. Frank never stayed past midnight, claiming his bad back couldn't handle the late shifts. Lucas preferred working alone anyway. Fewer sympathetic glances when colleagues noticed the worn wedding ring he still couldn't remove. Fewer questions about why a former insurance investigator now mopped floors for minimum wage. The service elevator climbed with mechanical precision, each floor marked by a soft ding that echoed in the empty shaft. Lucas watched the numbers climb. 25, 30, 35, 40. The building seemed to hold its breath during these ascents. 41. The executive floor where decisions affecting thousands of employees were made daily. Where Lucas had never belonged before his world collapsed 2 years ago. He wheeled his cart through corridors lined with motivational posters and employee recognition plaques. Excellence through innovation. Building tomorrow's success today. Corporate platitudes that once meant something to him when he'd believed in justice and accountability. Before Rachel's accident taught him that sometimes good people simply disappeared while the world continued spinning indifferently. The cart's wheels squeaked softly against polished floors as he made his way toward the corner office. Olivia Watson's domain occupied the building's premium real estate, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan's glittering skyline. Lucas had cleaned these windows countless times, always careful not to disturb the precisely arranged desk accessories and family photographs that suggested a life he'd never understand. Tonight, chaos had replaced that careful order. Papers scattered across the floor like autumn leaves after a storm. Financial documents bearing official letterheads mixed with handwritten notes covered in urgent scrawl. Lucas bent to collect the nearest pages, his investigative instincts automatically cataloging details before his conscious mind processed their significance. Wire transfer receipts, bank routing numbers, account balances in offshore institutions, names of shell companies that sounded like law firms but carried addresses in countries known for banking secrecy. $3 million moved on Tuesday, $5 million on Friday. Patterns that reminded him of cases he'd worked years ago when corporate fraud paid his salary and funded his family's modest but comfortable life. His phone vibrated against his chest pocket, the gentle buzz pulling him back to the present. A text message from Mrs. Carmen Henderson, the neighbor who'd become his lifeline since Rachel's death. "Sammy woke up asking for you. Told him Daddy's working hard to keep him safe. He drew you another picture, a superhero in a janitor's uniform." Lucas smiled despite the hollow ache in his chest. Sammy still believed his father was a hero, despite the dramatic change in their circumstances. The boy had adapted to their smaller apartment with surprising resilience, but sometimes Lucas caught him staring at photographs of their old house, the house they'd lost when insurance claims and medical bills consumed their savings, the house where Rachel had planned to watch their son grow up. The elevator chimed behind him, its sound cutting through his memories like a blade. Lucas spun around, expecting to see another custodial worker or perhaps a security guard making rounds. Instead, Olivia Watson stumbled out, her usual composure completely shattered. She clutched a manila envelope against her chest with white-knuckled desperation. Her breathing came in short, panicked gasps that fogged the air between them. The woman who commanded board meetings and merger negotiations now looked over her shoulder every few seconds, as if expecting pursuit. Her hands shook visibly as she fumbled with her office keys, the metal jingling like wind chimes in a storm. The confident executive who'd once passed Lucas in hallways without acknowledgement now seemed smaller, more human, more vulnerable than he'd ever imagined possible. "Mom?" Lucas stepped forward instinctively, his protective instincts overriding professional boundaries. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" Olivia's head snapped toward him with startling intensity. Her green eyes held the wild look of a deer caught in headlights, pupils dilated with adrenaline and terror. For several heartbeats, she simply stared at him, as if trying to determine whether he represented salvation or another threat. Recognition flickered across her features slowly, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "You're the janitor," she whispered, her voice carrying surprise and something that might have been relief. "The one with the little boy. I've seen his drawings taped inside your cart. He draws you as a superhero." Lucas felt heat rise in his cheeks. He's 6. Kids see the world differently. Sometimes children see more clearly than adults. Olivia glanced at the elevator doors again, tension radiating from her like heat from pavement. "You shouldn't be here tonight. Neither should I. But here we are, and now everything's changed." She noticed the scattered papers in his hands, and her face went pale as moonlight. The financial documents he'd collected contained information that could destroy careers, end lives, topple governments, information that made her current terror perfectly rational, information that transformed a simple custodial encounter into something far more dangerous. "You can read those numbers," she said. It wasn't a question. Lucas set the papers carefully on her desk, his movements deliberate and calm despite the chaos around them. "Insurance investigation teaches you to follow money trails. Corporate fraud leaves patterns. These patterns tell stories. What story do you see? Money laundering, shell companies, pension fund diversions. Someone's been very busy covering their tracks." He met her gaze directly. "But not busy enough." Olivia's shoulders sagged with something that might have been relief or exhaustion. 3 weeks ago, I noticed discrepancies in our quarterly reports. Small things at first. Rounding errors that didn't quite add up. Then I started digging deeper, thinking I'd found simple accounting mistakes. She moved to her computer terminal, her fingers dancing across keys with practiced efficiency. Screen after screen of financial data flowed past like digital waterfalls. Lucas recognized the signs of someone who'd been living with this secret for days, existing in a state of constant vigilance and growing desperation. $53 million over 18 months. She continued, her voice gaining strength with each revelation. Skimmed from employee pension funds in amounts small enough to avoid automatic auditing triggers. The money flows through a network of shell companies before disappearing into accounts controlled by Eastern European organized crime syndicates. Lucas felt his investigative instincts awakening after 2 years of dormancy. The same intellectual excitement that had driven him to solve cases when younger investigators gave up in frustration. But this excitement came tinged with awareness of personal stakes he'd never faced before. He had a 6-year-old son sleeping peacefully 3 boroughs away, depending on his father's safe return. "Who else knows?" he asked. "That's the problem. I don't know how high this goes. Board members might be involved. Senior executives certainly are. The money trail suggests coordination at multiple levels of management." Her hands trembled as she pulled additional documents from her desk drawer. "I've been gathering evidence, thinking I could take it to the authorities once I had enough proof." But they found out. The building's ventilation system hummed overhead with mechanical indifference, but underneath that familiar drone, Lucas caught something that made his blood run cold. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving up the stairwell with military precision. Not the casual pace of security guards making routine rounds. These were hunters who'd found their prey's scent. Olivia heard them too. Her face drained of color, and she pressed her back against the wall as if trying to disappear into the corporate wallpaper. The envelope in her hands crumpled slightly under increased pressure. Whatever it contained represented either salvation or damnation, depending on who reached it first. "How many ways out of this floor?" she asked, her executive mind immediately shifting to tactical thinking. Lucas's mind automatically catalogued escape routes, a habit developed during his first lonely months of night shift work, when exploring the building had helped distract him from grief. "Main elevator, service elevator requiring special access, emergency stairs on north and south sides, fire escape through the break room, executive bathroom window opens onto maintenance ledge." 5 options, she murmured, calculating odds with the same intensity she probably used for merger negotiations. 4, Lucas corrected grimly. "Main elevator's compromised. They came up that way." Something shifted in Olivia's expression as she studied his face. The same evaluative look she'd probably used to assess acquisition targets and hostile takeover opportunities. But this assessment carried personal stakes that no corporate transaction could match. "You're not just a janitor, are you?" The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. Lucas felt the weight of his hidden past pressing against his chest like a physical burden. Rachel used to say he had investigator's eyes that noticed details others missed. Eyes that saw patterns in chaos. Eyes that had failed to notice the drunk driver running the red light on a rainy Tuesday evening 2 years ago. "I clean floors now," he said carefully, unwilling to reveal more than necessary. "And before you cleaned floors?" The footsteps in the stairwell grew closer, their rhythm suggesting coordination between multiple individuals. Professional? Patient? Deadly. Lucas made a decision that would change everything for himself and his son. He grabbed his cleaning cart and wheeled it sideways, creating a makeshift barrier across the hallway entrance. Not much protection, but it might buy them precious seconds. Insurance investigator, 15 years with Mutual Assurance Group. His voice carried no pride, only resigned honesty. Specialized in corporate fraud and organized crime connections. Lost my license after my wife was killed. Couldn't focus on cases anymore. Made mistakes that cost clients money and nearly got people hurt. Olivia's eyes widened with something that definitely looked like relief. Then you understand what we're dealing with. I understand that people who steal $53 million don't hesitate to eliminate witnesses. Lucas pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. I'm sending a message to my neighbor. If something happens to me, she needs to take my son and disappear until this gets resolved. Your son. What's his name? Sammy. He just turned 6 last month. Lucas felt his throat tighten around words that carried the weight of everything he had to lose. His mother died in a car accident. He doesn't understand why Daddy took a night job or why we had to move to a smaller apartment. He just knows I come home every morning with stories about the big building where important people work. Olivia thrust the manila envelope toward him with sudden urgency. Then you understand why we can't let them win. This isn't just about money. It's about retirement funds for families like yours. It's about people who work their entire lives believing their future is secure. Lucas hesitated for a heartbeat before taking the envelope. The papers inside felt warm from her body heat, as if her desperation had transferred to the documents themselves. Bank statements, wire transfer records, account numbers that traced money through a maze of offshore companies before landing in accounts bearing names he'd seen in organized crime investigations years earlier. Dear God, he breathed, recognizing several names from cases that had ended in witness disappearances and unsolved homicides. Now you know why I'm so scared, Olivia whispered. These aren't corporate executives engaging in creative accounting. These are people who eliminate problems permanently and efficiently. The footsteps stopped. 7th floor. Too close for comfort. Lucas heard the distinctive metallic click of a stairwell door opening, followed by the soft whisper of expensive shoes against carpeted hallways. Professional killers who understood their craft well enough to move like ghosts through occupied buildings. Olivia grabbed his arm with surprising strength, her manicured nails leaving small crescents in his uniform shirt. I tried to be smart about this, gathered evidence slowly, carefully, thinking I could protect myself with documentation. But there's no protecting yourself from people who own judges and police commissioners. Lucas felt the familiar surge of investigative adrenaline that had once driven him to work 18-hour days on complex cases. The same intellectual excitement that had cost him everything when grief clouded his professional judgment. But this wasn't about redemption or professional validation. This was about a 6-year-old boy who needed his father to come home safely every morning. Why trust me with this? He asked, studying her face in the dim light filtering through office windows. Because you have everything to lose too. Her voice carried surprising gentleness for someone facing imminent death. I've watched you during my late nights at the office. Seen you talking to your son on your dinner break. Seen the way your whole face lights up when he calls to say goodnight. You understand what it means to protect someone you love more than your own life. The main elevator dinged with mechanical cheerfulness that seemed obscene given their circumstances. Lucas felt his blood turn to ice water as the doors slid open with hydraulic precision. Multiple shadows moved in the hallway beyond, professional figures who'd eliminated their fair share of problems over the years. "Spread out!" a voice commanded with the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "Watson's here somewhere. Building's locked down. No one gets in or out without our knowledge." Lucas guided Olivia around the corner toward the service corridor, moving through the maze of cubicles with practiced knowledge of every obstacle and hiding spot. She followed close enough that he could hear her suppressed breathing and feel the heat radiating from her fear-charged body. Her designer shoes made soft clicking sounds despite her efforts at silence. The service elevator required a special access card that Lucas had secretly copied months ago during a late-night furniture-moving project. A small violation of building security that could have cost him his job if discovered. Now it might save both their lives. His hands shook as he fumbled for the copied card, hidden behind Sammy's school photograph in his wallet. The card reader glowed red. Access denied. He tried again, swiping more slowly this time. Red again. Panic began crawling up his throat like acid as flashlight beams started sweeping through the cubicle maze behind them. On the fourth attempt, the reader finally flashed green. "Thank God," Olivia breathed as the service elevator doors whispered open. Lucas jabbed the button for the parking garage, and the elevator began its descent with agonizing slowness. Each floor seemed to take an eternity as they stood pressed against opposite walls, listening to their own heartbeats and the building's mechanical systems humming around them. "They'll be watching the main exits," Olivia said, stating the obvious with executive efficiency. "Not all of them." Lucas showed her his phone screen, which displayed a security camera feed app he'd discovered during lonely exploration of the building's systems. "Loading dock on sub-level 2. Camera's been broken for 6 months. Maintenance keeps forgetting to fix it." Olivia stared at the phone screen with dawning comprehension. "You've been planning escape routes." "I've been planning to protect my son," Lucas corrected, his voice harder than he'd intended. "Some nights I lie awake wondering if someone from my old cases might come looking for me. Old enemies with long memories and short tempers. I needed to know every possible way out of this building." The elevator stopped at the parking garage. Through the small window, Lucas could see 2 figures stationed near the main exit ramp. Patient professionals who understood that most prey eventually came to them if they simply waited long enough. He pressed the button for sub-level 2, and their descent continued into the building's mechanical bowels. "Tell me about your son," Olivia said quietly, perhaps seeking distraction from their precarious situation. "Sammy wants to be a detective when he grows up. Says he's going to solve mysteries and help people like his daddy used to do." Lucas felt his voice soften despite the terror clawing at his chest. "He doesn't understand why we had to move or why I work nights now. He just knows Daddy's different since Mummy went to heaven. You still help people. I mop floors and empty trash cans. You're helping me. Right now. Tonight. That counts for something." The elevator opened onto a dimly lit corridor that smelled of machine oil and industrial cleaning solvents. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows that seemed to move with their passage. Lucas led her past humming HVAC units and electrical panels toward the loading dock, each step taking them further from the safety of crowds and closer to whatever waited in the darkness outside. The loading dock door stood slightly ajar, revealing a slice of sodium-lit alley beyond. Lucas peered through the gap, scanning for any sign of surveillance or ambush. Empty dumpsters, scattered trash, no vehicles or figures waiting in obvious positions. But absence of evidence wasn't evidence of absence, especially when dealing with professionals. My car's parked 3 blocks north, Olivia whispered. Blue BMW sedan. License plate starts with HWT74. Lucas shook his head grimly. They'll have that information within minutes. Vehicle registration, usual parking spots, typical travel routes. You need to disappear completely, and your car is the first place they'll look. Then where can I go? They have contacts in law enforcement, government agencies, private security firms. Her voice cracked with exhaustion and mounting despair. I don't have friends I can trust with information this dangerous. My family consists of distant relatives who wouldn't understand corporate espionage if I drew them diagrams. Lucas thought of Sammy sleeping peacefully in Mrs. Henderson's spare bedroom, surrounded by the woman's collection of religious candles and family photographs. Thought of the promises he'd made to Rachel before the machines were turned off. Promises to keep their son safe and raise him to become a good man. Promises that sometimes required sacrifice beyond what seemed reasonable or fair. I know a safe place, he said finally. But first we need insurance against retaliation. He pulled out his phone and began recording a video message, his hands steadying as purpose replaced panic. My name is Lucas Bennett, employee number 77894 at Harrison Industries. If anything happens to me, or to Olivia Watson, CEO of this company, the evidence of a massive financial fraud is hidden in the building's main electrical panel on sub-level 3, behind the circuit breaker marked Emergency Lighting East Wing. The documentation proves that $53 million in employee pension funds have been stolen and funneled to organized crime syndicates through shell companies. He stopped recording and immediately uploaded copies to 3 different cloud storage accounts with automatic distribution protocols. If he didn't check in within 24 hours, emails would go out to his former FBI contacts, the State Attorney General's office, and 2 investigative journalists who still owed him favors from his previous career. Insurance policy, he explained simply. Olivia's expression shifted to something that might have been admiration mixed with professional respect. You think like someone who's done this before. I was someone who did this before. Now I'm a father who needs to get home to his son alive. They slipped through the loading dock door into the alley, where night air carried the scent of approaching rain mixed with urban decay. Lucas led her through a network of service alleys and fire escapes that he'd memorized during his first grief-stricken months of night shift work. These paths had become his meditation routes, ways to walk off the pain that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him during the small hours when memories felt most vivid. 25 minutes later, they stood outside a modest duplex in Queens that represented everything Lucas valued about honest, working-class life. Mrs. Carmen Henderson's house sat between a family-owned barbershop and a small grocery store that catered to the neighborhood's Dominican population. Light glowed behind curtains in the upstairs window where Sammy slept peacefully, unaware that his father's life had just taken a dramatic turn toward danger. This is your safe house? Olivia asked, clearly struggling to reconcile her expectations with reality. Mrs. Henderson has raised 8 grandchildren and 5 sons in this neighborhood. 3 of her boys are NYPD officers. 2 are military veterans with specialized training. 1 works private security for diplomatic families. Nobody gets past this family without explicit permission and thorough vetting. Lucas rang the doorbell using a special pattern they'd established for emergencies. 3 short rings, followed by 2 long ones, then a final short ring. The signal meant serious trouble that required immediate family mobilization. Within 30 seconds, the door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-60s wearing a floral housecoat and an expression of alert concern. Carmen Henderson had survived 40 years in Queens by trusting her instincts about people and situations. Those instincts had told her that the quiet janitor with sad eyes and a beautiful son needed looking after. They'd also warned her that he carried secrets from his previous life that might someday come calling with violent intentions. "Lucas? What's wrong, mijo? Is it Sammy?" "Sammy's safe upstairs, but we're in serious trouble, Mrs. H. This is Olivia Watson. She's in immediate danger, and helping her puts all of us at risk." Carmen Henderson looked at the woman in the torn silk blouse and smeared makeup, looked at the terror in her green eyes and the way she held herself like someone being actively hunted. Then she looked at Lucas, seeing something in his expression that she'd been waiting 2 years to witness. The return of the confident, capable man he'd been before grief broke him into pieces. "Come inside," she said without hesitation. "Miguel's working late shift tonight, but I can call him." The next several hours passed in careful planning and quiet conversation, punctuated by phone calls to various Henderson family members. Detective Miguel Henderson arrived within 45 minutes, still wearing his uniform and carrying the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much human darkness. His questions were professionally thorough, but personally gentle. "This evidence is solid," Miguel said after reviewing Olivia's documentation. "Financial Crimes Division will want to examine everything, but the patterns are clear enough for immediate action. Problem is, corruption investigations take months to develop properly." "How long for witness protection?" Olivia asked. "Days, maybe weeks to arrange federal protection. These people have long reach and patient methods. I'll be dead by sunrise." Sammy woke up just before dawn, his internal clock attuned to his father's usual return time. Lucas held his son close, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and sleepy warmth that represented everything pure and good in his transformed life. The boy's questions came in whispered fragments, simple and trusting. "Why are you here so early, Daddy? Who's the pretty lady with sad eyes? When can we go home to our apartment?" "Soon, buddy," Lucas whispered back, his throat tight with emotion. "Daddy just needs to help someone first. Someone who's in trouble." Sammy studied his father's face with Rachel's perceptive eyes, seeing details that adults might miss. "Is it dangerous like the work you used to do before Mommy went to heaven?" Lucas felt his heart break a little more. "Maybe a little dangerous. But sometimes good people have to do difficult things to protect other good people who can't protect themselves." "Will you come home safe?" "I promise, Sammy. No matter what happens, Daddy will always find a way home to you." It was a promise he wasn't entirely sure he could keep, but it was a promise worth making regardless of personal cost, worth fighting for, worth dying for if circumstances demanded that level of sacrifice. By 7 a.m., they had developed a workable plan. Miguel had contacted FBI agent Sarah Chen, a former colleague who specialized in financial crimes with organized crime connections. Agent Chen agreed to meet them at Federal Plaza, but warned that official protection protocols would take significant time to implement properly. Lucas called in sick to work for the first time in 24 months. His supervisor, Frank Rodriguez, seemed genuinely surprised that his most reliable employee suddenly needed personal time. Lucas didn't explain the circumstances. Couldn't explain without potentially putting everyone at Harrison Industries in immediate danger. The meeting with Agent Chen exceeded their most optimistic expectations. She reviewed Olivia's evidence with the focused intensity of someone who understood its far-reaching implications. The money trail was clear and well documented. The connections to known criminal organizations were established through multiple sources. The threat to pension funds affected thousands of working families throughout the region. "We can protect you," Agent Chen assured Olivia with professional confidence. "But federal witness protection means complete identity reconstruction. New name, new background, new life in a location determined by security considerations. You'll disappear entirely until we can dismantle this criminal network." Olivia looked across the sterile federal building conference room at Lucas, who'd spent 2 years cleaning floors to support his son after losing everything that had once defined his identity and purpose. He'd sacrificed his career, his pride, his future to provide stability for a boy who'd already lost his mother. Now he was risking everything to help a virtual stranger simply because it represented the right thing to do. "What about Lucas?" she asked. "They know he helped me escape. They'll come for him and his son." Agent Chen's expression grew appropriately somber. "We can offer protection, but relocating a child involves complex custody considerations and psychological impact assessments." "No," Lucas said quietly, but with absolute finality. "Sammy needs stability above everything else. He needs his home, his school, his friends, his routine. He's lost enough already." "Then you remain at significant personal risk." "I've been at risk since my wife died. Risk becomes relative when you've already lost everything that mattered most." 3 days later, local news reported that Olivia Watson had died in a single-car accident on the Queensboro Bridge during heavy rain. Her body was never recovered despite extensive search efforts. The media covered the story briefly before moving on to other tragedies. Harrison Industries' stock price fluctuated for exactly 1 week before stabilizing under new executive leadership. Lucas returned to his night shift at Harrison Industries, where the new management team seemed competent but refreshingly unimaginative. They installed upgraded security systems and implemented comprehensive financial oversight procedures designed to prevent future irregularities. They also provided the custodial staff with a modest but meaningful raise and improved benefits package. 2 months after Olivia Watson's supposed death, federal agents conducted coordinated arrests of 17 individuals connected to an international money laundering operation. The arrests made front-page news for 3 consecutive days. Financial analysts praised the FBI's sophisticated investigation techniques. Nobody mentioned the janitor who'd helped a terrified CEO escape through a loading dock on a night that changed everything. Lucas kept newspaper clippings about the arrests in a folder next to Rachel's photographs and Sammy's school artwork. Evidence that good sometimes prevailed over evil. Evidence that ordinary people could make extraordinary differences when circumstances demanded courage. Evidence that promises made to those we love sometimes require us to become more than we ever imagined possible. Sammy began asking fewer worried questions about unpaid bills and final notice letters. The boy's laughter came more easily now, and his drawings included more smiles and fewer anxious lines around stick-figure Daddy's face. He still talked about becoming a detective when he grew up, still dreamed of helping people and solving important mysteries. But now he also talked about how brave his daddy was and how proud Mummy would be if she could see them now. Mrs. Henderson continued watching Sammy during night shifts, never asking about the woman with frightened eyes who'd appeared that dangerous evening, never mentioning the conversations she'd overheard about federal agents and witness protection programs. Some secrets were meant to be kept. Some silences carried more power than any words. Late one night, almost exactly 1 year later, Lucas found an unmarked envelope slipped under his apartment door. No return address, no postmark, no identifying characteristics. Inside was a single photograph showing a woman with short, dark hair and brown eyes standing beside a small cafe in what appeared to be a European city. She was smiling genuinely, with the kind of expression that reached the eyes and suggested hard-won peace. On the photograph's back, someone had written in careful handwriting, "Thank you for showing me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite being absolutely terrified. Your son is incredibly lucky to have a real hero for a father. With eternal gratitude, a friend who will never forget." Lucas tucked the photograph into his wallet behind Sammy's most recent school picture. Another reminder that sometimes the smallest actions created the largest ripples of positive change. Sometimes the quietest voices spoke the most important truths. Sometimes the most ordinary people became exactly who the world needed them to be at precisely the right moment. The next morning, Sammy asked if they could walk to school together instead of taking their usual bus route. Lucas checked his watch and realized he had time. Had made time. They walked hand in hand through Queens sunshine, talking about everything and nothing important, about school projects and weekend plans, about cherished memories of Mummy and exciting dreams for their future together. "Daddy?" Sammy asked as they reached the school playground, where other children were already gathering for another day of learning and growing. "Yes, buddy? I love you more than all the stars in the sky." "I love you too, Sammy. Always and forever." It was a promise Lucas knew he could keep regardless of whatever challenges the future might bring. A promise worth every risk he'd taken and every sacrifice he'd made. A promise that made everything else not just possible, but meaningful. As he watched his son run toward friends waiting by the swings, Lucas reflected on the choices that had brought them to this moment of simple happiness. The choice to help instead of walking away safely. The choice to trust instead of remaining isolated by grief. The choice to become the father his son deserved, even when that meant becoming far more than he'd thought himself capable of being. Sometimes the most important conversations happened in desperate whispers. Sometimes the most powerful words were, "Don't talk." Sometimes silence protected what mattered most in the world. And sometimes, in the space between paralyzing fear and transformative courage, ordinary people discovered they were capable of absolutely extraordinary things that changed lives forever.